Okay, hello everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today for the webinar of this series introducing the research priority teams of the ICARP IV process. My name is Nina Lavrenteva. I work for the European Polar Board, and I'm here with the co-chair of the ICARP IV Research Priority Team 6, Education and Knowledge Sharing in and about the Arctic, Research and Practice. So here with me today, Inga and Rem, who will present their research priority team. And I would like to just briefly say a couple of words about the ICARP IV process. So the International Arctic Science Committee, IASC, in cooperation with many partners worldwide, is coordinating a multi-year planning process for the 4th International Conference on Arctic Research Planning. It lasts from 2022 to 2026 and engages Arctic researchers, indigenous peoples, policymakers, residents, and stakeholders from around the world to discuss the state of the Arctic science and the place that Arctic occupies in the global affairs and systems. The ICARP IV process thus aims to consider the most urgent knowledge gaps and Arctic research priorities for the next decade and explore avenues to address these gaps. So between 2024 and 2025, the ICARP IV International Steering Committee convened 7 research priority teams that will work with the input provided through the ICARP IV community engagement process to define the knowledge gaps and research priorities for their topic area and identify and suggest opportunities to enhance synergies across existing and planned research activities. So the European Polar Board is very happy to host this webinar series for the RPTs. We will start with the presentation from our Research Priority Team 6. And there's a Q&A box available for your questions and comments. So please don't hesitate to use it throughout the whole webinar. And we'll take the questions after the presentation. And with this, I'm giving the floor to our RPT6. We can now share a screen.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm really happy to be here today and to talk a little bit about our research priority team, team number 6. I have to say that Diane, who is the co-chair together with me for the RPT6, can't be with us today because she lives in Anchorage and it's in the middle of the night. So I told her it's actually fine for me to do it, but I am not doing it by myself. I'm really happy that I have a lot of support by Ram. Ram is a member of the RPT6, and he really helped a lot with preparing the presentation today. And he will also prepare some of the slides. We will give a little introduction again as well about the ICARP process and also a little bit of the history about it and of our RPT6, of course. And but at the end, our main point is actually to get input from you as well. We will give you some opportunities and show you some opportunities how to give us feedback, how to give us input, and how you can actually get in contact with us, because one of the main issues or one of the main goals is also to get as many people and as the entire community involved in this very important process. So I'm going to start my presentation now and share my screen. I hope you can see it now. Maybe just, yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah, as I said, today it's Ram and myself, who are giving the presentation. And this is a little bit the outline of today. So we will first have the big picture, because ICARP is embedded in the IPY, so the International Polar Year, or it's kind of a pre-process for the International Polar Year, the 5th one, which will take place 2032 to 2033. Then we will have a little throwback to give you a broad overview about the last ICARPs. Then, of course, the ICARP IV, the recent one, and the RPTs. And as I said, then our RPT6, what we did already, what we had as meetings, what we already collected as input, and then how you can get involved and how we're going to continue. Here you see where and how ICARP IV is embedded in the product timeline. We start here in 2007, 2008, when the last IPY took place. It seems like a really long time ago. I did my PhD at that time, but I remember really good all these meetings and all these very nice conferences where I actually got first involved in this very, very active community. And you see here the timeline that goes until the next IPY. As I said, 2032, 2033. And we are now here in this place now with the yellow line. So the ICARP process that started already 2002 and will proceed until 2005. You see at the top all the important conferences that will take place until the next IPY, and you can also see other large initiatives, international activities that take place during that time. So we are here, says this very red sign, and that means that the ICARP process now, we want to actually define the major topics and the most important projects and things that has to be tackled during the next IPY. So it's kind of the preparation for the IPY for the Arctic part, and to get to know what should be done during the IPY and which project would probably be the best to embed in the next IPY. Here I move forward now, and you see that there have been 3 others ICARP processes in the past already. So the first one was in 2095, and these ICARPs are always comes always together with a conference. And the first one was held in Hanover in the US, and there were lots of scientists that came together and gathered to talk about the major issues. I think there have been 2,050 scientists, including some from Russia. And this group was notable both for its diversity and also for its strong sense of community that pervaded the meeting. And then we had the next ICARP that was 10 years later in 2005. This one took place in Copenhagen in Denmark. And also there have been lots of scientists, but then also policymakers came, research managers, indigenous people. So it was already much broader, and the future of the Arctic research was discussed in a, let's say, a little bit more interdisciplinary way. And then we had the ICARP III, the last one, the one was in the one in that I was involved already as well. ICARP III in 2015. The conference took place in Toyama, Japan. And during this meeting, this meeting provided a framework to identify Arctic science priorities for actually the next decade. So until now. And it was also a place to inform the policymakers and the people who live in the Arctic or near the Arctic, and also the global community to build constructive relationships between producers of knowledge and users of knowledge. And now we are in the phase of the ICARP IV. And Nina already said a lot of things about it. It started already with, let's say, a preparation phase in 2002. And will then lead now until the big conference next year in March, which will take place in Boulder, Colorado. And this will be also the place where the first results of the work of the research priority teams will be presented. And now, of course, is the question, what are these priority teams? And therefore, I might go further here on my slides. Here you see the different priority teams. There are 7 priority teams, and there is one, the research priority team 1, that tackles the question, the role of the Arctic in the global system. Then there's research priority team 2, and they already had their webinar, so maybe some of you attended that. It's observing, reconstructing, and predicting future climate dynamics and ecosystems responses. Then there's Team 6, understanding the dynamics and resilience of Arctic social ecological systems to foster sustainable futures. Then Team 4, Arctic research, cooperation, and diplomacy. Then 5, co-production and indigenous-led methodologies. 6, it's ours, education and knowledge sharing in and about the Arctic, research and practice. And 7, technology, infrastructure, logistics, and services. And although I went very quickly through these different topics right now, you may already have seen or recognized that there are indeed a lot of overlapping topics and issues. And therefore, during this phase, it's also very important to us to meet with the other teams and to exchange what they are doing, just to make sure that we are not working next to each other instead of working with the others together. So now our team. We have 19 members, and Diana and me as co-chairs. It's quite a very nice mix of scientists, educators, and I'm really happy to say that we also have a lot of indigenous people with us, and their input is very, very valid and important for our research team as well. And we worked already together now since the beginning of 2003, and I'm really happy to lead this group until the end of this process. And now I'm handing over to Ram, who is telling you a little bit more about what we did so far.
Yeah, so I think, thank you, Inga. You can continue handling the slides. I'll just be focusing on the content. I think one of the critical things was meeting last year and, at conferences, and at the start of this year when we had the ASSW, especially meeting as RPT6 in person. And it was a fantastic opportunity. And but as an RPT, sometimes we have a certain mandate, and one of them being reviewing and analyzing community input. And something that we had realized was we have to make sure that it's what we do is fairly inclusive, and as far and wide and deep that we can reach out with the set of inputs, the more purposeful our engagement will be, and the more defined and articulate our output will also be, right? So I think that was extremely important, and we are still in the process of taking inputs, the last set of stages before we compile our report. We also, one of the aspects was also defining the research priorities, as Inga told at the start of the session. And these research priorities are kind of interrelated in the sense that the participants the knowledge holders, researchers, educators, the diverse set of people who give inputs, right? They need to be factored in holistically and make sure that we are able to come up with what are the key research priorities for this particular group. And based on the inputs, also to provide recommendations to address the gaps. And one of the things that came out was also defining what we say when we say what is a priority and what is, say, a gap. It should not come through as though it is from a place of deficit, but the fact that there are communication barriers, there are engagement barriers, there are access barriers. So I think in that sense, it's important to identify and make sure that we remove those barriers. And a lot of times we know what to do, but sometimes we don't know how to do it, right? And sometimes these might arise in such contexts. And lastly, in terms of consultation on preliminary results of each RPT, so some of the approved sessions like this webinar, which each RPT is doing, it's also important that the groups meet from time to time and ensure that we discuss about what are the inputs that we have received. We analyze them and share them as well. And all of you are stakeholders in this process, and it's important for us to make sure that each participant is acknowledged and each input is looked at and analyzed as well. So as an RPT, I think these were very categorical and very clear. And most importantly, in terms of also keeping others up to date as to what has happened during the course of the last 6 months and 8 months. We'll just show a quick snapshot. Inga, if you can go on to the next slide. Yeah. So initially we started out with, the topic, which was a little more, specific in nature, preparing present and future generations through communication, capacity building, and so on. And during the process, obviously, we had one day which was an open meeting where we brought in a lot more people to, seek their inputs, and we were thankful for that, because sometimes some of the things that we phrase are not always inclusive. So we looked at, how to make it more inclusive, rework on some of the statements, rework on some of the content. And then the following day, we looked at a closed meeting. And it was also a safe space where people could voice out their concerns. And a lot of it is because it involves education, right? There's a huge process of, various aspects to education. And one of the themes also, which is very important, is in some locations and constituencies or countries, is about decolonizing education, right? So there are ways and means of how things are done, and I think it was very important to have that discussion, what to include, how to include, what not to include, and so on. And also some of us, because we are coming from a certain research background or an educational background, there might be certain blind spots which you would not, be able to cover thinking independently. So I think thinking together as a group of 20-25 people helped a lot. And obviously, it's very difficult to arrive upon a consensus. So in the 2 days, there were certain things where we agreed upon, and there were a few things which were kind of left to online discussions. And then slowly, we're seeking more inputs to see, making sure that everyone is represented and all those inputs are taken into account. And we eventually looked at simplifying the title to education and knowledge sharing in and about the Arctic. In the Arctic, because obviously of peoples of the Arctic being primary to it, but also the fact that there are a lot of educators, researchers, science communicators who are outside the Arctic, but communicating a lot about the Arctic in their classrooms, in their universities, and their research spaces, right? And so there are two aspects to look at it. And secondly, it was important to look at research and practice. Because as Inga was recollecting her young days, uh, a, a high school student today is going to be an early career researcher in 2032, right? So if we don't include the fact that there are university and high school educators who are addressing these people who will be, involved in projects 8 years or 9 years down the line, then you're missing out on an opportunity to make sure that we are able to communicate what we intend to set out, right? So that's something that we wanted to bring to the table. Inga, if you can move to the next one. So with respect to inputs that we got early on, obviously this includes people who are part of the RPT, as well as some of the initial ICARP surveys, which were generic in nature, and specific inputs that some of the members carried out surveys with respect to RPT6. We had obviously the usual suspects who are involved in Arctic research, but I think it's important to list out that there's a diverse set of people that we would like to have inputs from, and definitely because some of it was also done early on at conferences and just before and after conferences. It is also likely that people who participated in those conferences were involved in giving inputs a lot more. But I think there are a lot of other areas. This sample is slightly older. We're still getting inputs, but we definitely would like to have more inputs. And on the right-hand side, just to name a few, right? Obviously, indigenous community members, knowledge holders are vital. Both researchers and practicing educators, because they are the ones who are dealing with the younger generation who will be, molded into early career researchers and scientists over the next decade. I think they are an important, factor to consider. And obviously, early career researchers who are already involved, and the diverse set of science communicators, whether in the media or in terms of scientific journals who talk about what is going on in cutting edge research in the Arctic or the Antarctic or the third pole, right? And because scientists are also involved in both the Arctic, the Antarctic, and if I take the cryosphere as a whole in terms of the third pole, glaciers, the Himalayan regions, and so on, I think from a science standpoint, I think it's important to take some inputs there as well. And obviously, there are some avatars that I have put at the bottom because people might relate to certain other roles that they play. A researcher or a scientist is sometimes also an educator or a science communicator. So they can wear multiple hats. So I think this was important for us to put out there that, inputs from every participant is important. And we hope that you will help us and be part of this process and make sure that we are headed in the right direction. Next slide, Inga. So we did, like I said, receive inputs, which were general ICARP 4 inputs which covered across RPTs, and they were RPT6 specific inputs, right? And as Inga was talking about where we are, I think while we are taking inputs from the community, slowly by the end of this year, it's about defining those research priorities. And the next conference with respect to ICARP IV or the Arctic Science Summit Week 2025 is happening in March in Boulder, USA. That's where it will kind of culminate, and then starts the implementation, and possibly ICARP 4 would become ICARP 5, but the or whatever is a logical next phase. But I think it's very important to mention that all the input that we collect now will be analyzed, will feed into this process, and eventually this all goes into ramping up various projects where we know that these are the research questions and these are the ideas which need to be taken forward and lead up to the IPY, right? And you can refer to the ICARP process link that is mentioned at the bottom of the screen in case you haven't gotten into ICARP as much as you would like to, and it's fairly simplified and presented there. Next slide, Inga. So the next steps, I think, is coming down to all of you being involved, and in terms of some of the research questions that we had come up with. You can find in the survey, and it's a very short survey that we would like you to take. It's only about 5 questions, and you can scan the QR code and go to the survey. We'll also send you the link, and these were some of the key topics, like what are the key research topics and questions around education and knowledge sharing in the Arctic that should be explored. And people can think along the lines of what is the role of education as such, and like I mentioned earlier, decolonizing the education process is a very, very important theme, and I think obviously the way it gets implemented in different regions in different countries would be different. But I think it's something that is very important to people. And obviously best practices in terms of land-based education or place-based education, if you want to call it so. And so these are themes along which you can think, give your inputs. There is no restriction on these are the 3 things that should be covered, but these are things which came up in the discussions that we had in person. And one more question that we had was, how do we strengthen teaching and learning about the Arctic? And obviously a lot of teaching about the Arctic, communication and even research at university level happens to a lot of countries which are outside the Arctic, right? So and I'm from India and closer to the third pole. So what I hear about the Arctic or what I see, I go every year to the Arctic. So I do get some visual confirmation and some research, but normally it's not the case with everyone. So I think it's important to make sure that we have some sort of a framework to deal with it, right? I'll hand it now over back to Inga to elaborate a little bit more, and please do fill in the survey. Over to you, Inga.
Yes. So thanks, Ram, for this very good overview about what we did. So now, of course, it's gonna be very important about what we want to achieve during the next month and what we have in mind and the road ahead, and what we have to achieve. And of course, first of all, we have to review and to analyze all the input that we gathered so far. So everything that Ram was telling you or us during the last minutes, but also what we will get or now from you during with the survey and so far. And of course, this is why we need the community input. And then we have to write a final report to endorse different projects. We are gonna have the results from the survey. And then also there was a survey on the website for the different topic areas, and all these input will come together and to give us some overviews and to give us some ideas what we have to actually put then into the final report. There is also, or we are also doing a research, or we did already a research about already existing national and regional Arctic science plans, because there are already some on the way, where we can, of course, also get a lot of information about what is important at the moment in Arctic research and the Arctic community. And within that, a strong emphasis should be placed on comparing them from an international perspective and focus, and to also see maybe what can be transferred to another country or region as well. And then, of course, we're also collecting every other important document that might be relevant for our team. And then in the next phase, we then have to define the most important research topics, so the most important research priorities. And with the input of all these analysis and the review that we did in the past and that we will do now again, we hope to be able to define these priorities. And therefore, we will draft then the first output for the ASSW, and in 2025 in March. And then, of course, we will discuss this again with the other research priority teams, and also present what we have in mind. And then between the ASSW, so the Arctic Science Summit Week next year, and the end of 2025 and beginning of 2026, we then have to write the report and start implementing what we think is the most important. Yeah, and this is now the end of our presentation. And Ram already told you that you can give your input via the survey. It's a very broad survey with text boxes, so you can type in whatever you have in mind. And but also, of course, you can just use my email address and send you what you think might be important to us to know, or if you have any documents or from any national plans, then let us or me know as well. And with this last slide, I will now open the floor to questions and to your input. I see in the participant list that there are some of our some members of our team, but I also see many others. So it might be interesting to get input from you as well. By this, I will also take this opportunity to let you know that 3 of our team, we have submitted a session for the ASSW next year about education in the Arctic. And it might be nice if you can think about or considering submitting an abstract for it. The deadline is at the moment on the 30th of October, but I think we are all used to that these deadlines are being extended. But at the moment, it's still the 30th of October, so it's already on Monday. Yeah, maybe you can use this opportunity to also get more involved and to get your input and maybe what you do so far. I see there is already one question from Kirk Anderson, who's saying, thanks for the presentation. A key point of the discussion was educating, gaining access to other themes, RPTs. So I think that this is or he's tackling the point that I was also saying at the beginning, that it's quite important that we have a collaboration with the other teams. And there is one conference or one meeting now in end of October in Akureyri, where all the co-chairs are meeting. And this is also a first opportunity where we actually, I have switched on my camera, where we actually will have, I think, really deep discussions and exchanges with the other teams as well. Because, I mean, there have been, of course, at the ASSW this year as well. But I think at this point, we all have to find ourselves and think about what we are doing in our teams. And now we have this really closed environment where we can go and talk to the other RPTs and find interfaces and so on. So now there's Rafe who's saying, hey, Inga and Ram. I don't know if you want to say more. But yeah, if there's more questions, then just type them in the box as well, please. So if there's now nobody else, then I think it might be maybe good. I don't know if you from the European Polar Board are going to share the record also to the participants, or if it's going to be available on your website or the YouTube channel. But maybe there might be a possibility to also highlight again the QR code or the website or the URL for our survey, so that people can directly access to it. There's also nothing in the chat, I think. Oh, then here is, I had, Raif is saying something more. I had been to Antarctic in November 2020. Being a meteorologist, worked in winter. Is there any chance of joining the RPT community for joining in Arctic? So I'm not quite sure what the question is. Of course, there's always a possibility to join the RPT community. You know, you mean that the problem is that you have been in the Antarctic and now you want to be part of our team who's talking about the Arctic? I don't think that's a problem, because I'm from SCAR, and SCAR is the Scientific Committee on Antarctic Research. And at the end, we are all working towards the IPY, which is a bipolar decade. So I think this is not going to be a problem or barrier. But on the other hand, or I think it's even welcomed to have this view as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think finding the relevant RPT is important, Rajiv. So if you have experience along infrastructure lines, which might be relevant to a particular RPT, maybe not RPT6, but say one of the other RPTs, I think where you fit in most is something that you want to look at. And secondly, obviously, because this process has been going on over the last 1 year, and there are existing members. Sometimes there might be openings, or I don't know what the process is for each of the RPTs, but definitely it is worth checking with the chair of the respective RPT to, which you find relevant, and you can just mail them and see if there's an opportunity to be part of it. So no harm trying there. And like Inga said, there's no restriction that if you've been working in the Antarctic that you shouldn't be in the Arctic. There are quite a few practices which are common in terms of science and definitely with education as well. So give it a shot. Nothing wrong there.
Yes, and I also just typed in the chat my email address and the URL for the form if somebody want to join or send me a direct email. So if there's no other question and nothing else, I'd say we can also just end here, right?
Yeah.
And oh no, there is something more I just see. Prashant, I'm sorry if that's not the right pronunciation. He is saying, I want to he wants to know from you, Ram, your 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 experience, I think, from somebody who is from India. He's working as wildlife biologist in a forest department. So maybe you can say
I'll just share my email and we can discuss this offline, Prashant.
Perfect.
This might not be the best
right
forum to discuss. Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to know that, yes, as Inga said, we can also share a link to the form that you shared on the EPB website, together with the information about the ICARP for webinars and the links. So please do check this out and engage with the RPTs.
And there was also another question here about the survey. If I can put it in the chat, it's actually already in there.
Yep.
The link.
Yeah, we can also share it with the webinar participants after the webinar. That may be also a good way to.
Yeah, that would be good, Nina. I think sending it over email is always a good thing. And just a request to. Yeah, go ahead, Inga.
I just wanted to say I encourage all of you to also send it to your colleagues, because as many input we get, the better it's gonna be our analysis.
May I ask the question from my side? So you were saying about the role of the educators and the high school students in this process, which is super important and which we don't talk about very often. And I find it very, very important that you do. What are the main challenges that you see or that you have encountered already in the initial steps of your work process in this regard, in terms of including the educators and the high school students in the process?
Right. So I can give you, my experience, at least in terms of when I've involved myself with, educating students. One is that a lot of students who are part of programs, so one is being taught in their own places, which is in their own countries. And the second bit is students who travel to the Arctic to learn about the Arctic as part of various programs as part of their countries, and projects which could be like, students on ice or something like that, where you are taking students to a different place. It's more experiential education, outbound education, if you might call it so. So I think as I mentioned earlier, there is something about education where what is being taught is one aspect and how it is taught is another one, right? And one of the things that is happening in all the countries, including I also deal with curriculum in the tropics, so the Amazon, India, everywhere else. So one of the aspects is bringing in indigenous knowledge into mainstream curriculum, right? So I've studied and worked in New Zealand as well a little bit on their projects in Antarctic. The Maori values and topics are strongly integrated into the mainstream New Zealand curriculum, right? Canada has about 4 or 5 different popular curriculum. Denmark and Greenland, you have the Inuit curriculum. You have the Sami, people working on their own knowledge systems and so on. So I think integrating that with respect to values and communicating early on is very important. Most of the values are fairly common, right? Self-reliance, leave no trace, taking care of the whole concept of harvesting an animal is something that not every person outside the Arctic would know about. Yeah, some indigenous populations would, but what does it mean when I say harvest, say a polar bear or a musk ox or something like that, right? So understanding where they come from and some of those values are important. The second thing is obviously there is a risk involved. There is a way to do things. So when you take students from here to the Arctic to do research, one thing that differentiates the Arctic from the Antarctic is that there are people living in the Arctic. When you go to the Antarctic, it is on behalf of your country, or you're part of a research expedition and you are at a base station, right? So in that sense, the two are slightly different, and more often than not, people who are going there need to be sensitized to what is going on, and I think that becomes important. And one other thing which I think is a challenge is that a lot of the cutting edge research uh, often comes through news channels and media, which might be exaggerated, which might be biased, which might be, so getting knowledge from the source needs to be curated a little bit before that is consumed and put out to students, right? Of course, a lot of things about the Arctic are not for me to talk about because it is not my story, but but I'm just voicing out in terms of certain things that have happened, and sometimes you get feedback from your friends who live there, and I've been going back to the Arctic every year since 2011. So you do notice what's changing, what is not changing, and you bring it back into the classroom, right? So I think it's important to understand these aspects, and also one of the things is a lot of content sometimes there is miscommunication because they're not necessarily translated well into English, right? The tone is not covered, the reason how it is narrated, or there is always some chopping and changing and editing. So these are things you need to be aware of, but sometimes these do end up posing challenges when it comes to classroom and taking students up. Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much for the detailed answer and input on this.
You're welcome. Thank
That's
you.
extremely important and an interesting, like an important side of this on this topic. All right. So as I noted before, the information on the with the link to the form will be sent out to the participants, and we can also put it in the description of the YouTube video that will be available soon on our YouTube, on the European Polar Board YouTube channel. So I just wanted to note that there's going to be a few more webinars introducing the research priority teams of the ICARP IV process. So the next one is tomorrow evening in Europe. So please join us also for the discussion on the other priority topics of the ICARP IV process. And you have QR code there as well with the link for more information on this. So thank you very much again, Inga and Rem, for this presentation. It was really interesting to find out about your research priority team. And we hope that the community engages with the research priority teams and that the survey and the form will be useful for this. Thank you very much again, and have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Nina.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.